Hey guys, I hope that you are doing well. We're continuing this topic of prayer because it matters. It's so important. It's a great way to start a year, seeing God off in prayer and in different spiritual disciplines. But prayer is so important. Next month, we're actually going to talk a little bit about Scripture and reading the Bible and a little bit about the Bible and learn some more about that. And so, really excited and about that. But I want to end this month as we've been talking about prayer. I want to end this month talking about a passage of Scripture from Luke chapter 18. So we're going to be in Luke chapter 18. We're going to begin in verse 1 because I think there's some things, verses 1 through 14, there are a few things about prayer that I think Jesus wanted us to know. Again, we've been looking at what does Jesus have to say about prayer? Because if we want to know what God thinks about prayer, then God himself as a man, what he said about prayer would obviously be pretty important. And so we need to focus on what Jesus said about prayer. And so that's what we're doing this month. And so Luke chapter 18, beginning in verse 1, here's what it says. Now he, Jesus, told them a parable on the need for them to pray always and not give up. So Luke already tells us this is the reason behind the story that Jesus is about to tell here. The purpose is that we need to be praying always and we need to not give up. Okay. So now here's the story that Jesus tells. There was a judge in a certain town who did not fear God or respect people. So, this judge had to be just a miserable, just not a good dude, right? Not a good dude at all. Like, he did not fear God, so he didn't care about God or anything of God or the things of God or what God said or what God did not fear God, but he also did not respect people at all. So, Jesus says, love God and love others. This man did neither of those things, right? Total tool. This guy was bad dude. Verse 3, and a widow in that town kept coming to him and saying, give me justice against my adversary. Now, we don't know who her adversary was. We don't know what kind of justice she was seeking. We don't know what had happened to this lady. But she is coming to this judge. It says a widow kept coming. The thought behind this is she came over and over and over again, asking him for justice. Verse 4, for a while, he was unwilling. But later he said to himself, even though I don't fear God and respect people, even though I don't love God and don't love people, even though I don't care about God or anything he says or respect people, yet because this widow keeps pestering me, I will give her justice so that she doesn't wear me out by her persistent coming. Then the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. Will not God grant justice to his elect who cry out to him day and night, who constantly cry out to him? Will he delay helping them? I tell you that he will swiftly grant them justice. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? So he tells us there that an important part of prayer is faith. Faith in God, trusting God enough to constantly pray and to not give up in our prayer. And when he says in verse 5, the judge says, hey, I'm going to give her justice so that she doesn't wear me out by her persistent coming. What if our goal in prayer was to wear the ear of God out? Like, what if our goal in prayer was to be so persistent in prayer, praying so constantly, so continuously, asking God for the things that we desire, that we want to see, asking God over and 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 over again until we just wear his ear out. And maybe as God changes and transforms us and our desires become like his desires, as we continue to ask these things, maybe God we know God's going to hear it. We know God is going to answer somehow. Who knows? Maybe God will be like this and give us the things that we're asking for, the things that we desire, because we continue to ask. I think there are a couple of things that are true about prayer. I think some people don't see the prayers that they want answered in the way that they want answered, maybe, or prayers that they're praying for. They don't see some of those things answered because they give up praying too soon. I think we as a Western culture give up praying too soon because we live in an instant gratification culture. Everything's instantaneous. Everything's on the internet. You have access to everything right now. You have fast food. You can go get your food quickly. Nobody wants to cook anymore. We live in this instantaneous, instant gratification culture. And so prayer wars against that in some ways, right? Because I think God cares more about what's happening in here than he does about actually answering our prayers in the way that we want them answered. And so I think sometimes God knows how good it is for us internally, for us to become more like Jesus, for us to have to develop some muscles of patience and perseverance and endurance. And prayer is the way that God transforms us inside and allows us to build up some of those muscles. So what would it look like for you to wear the ear of God out? I mean, if you're a parent to a kid, you know that you are never going to teach your kids how to endure, how to persevere through hard things, or how to be patient if you give them what they want and what they ask for every single time immediately. It'll never happen. And the problem with most Christians in our culture is that we live in a culture that everybody gets what they want instantaneously. You want something, you buy it on Amazon instantaneously. You want some food, you can go to a fast food. You want to know anything, you can download it on Google instantaneously, right? We live in that kind of culture. And so our brains are wired and modeled in this instant gratification way. And so God cares about transformation in here. And so the way that he can transform in here is war against our culture that is unbiblical in many ways, and help his people develop this skill and gift and muscle of perseverance, endurance, and patience. And that happens through prayer. So what would it look like for you to wear the ear of God out this year? For you to not give up asking the things you desire, the things that you want, the things that you're praying about. Keep praying daily, constantly, multiple times a day. Ask God for the same thing over and over and over again, and just see what he does. Right? See what he does. And then he goes on in verse 9 and he says this. He also told them this parable to some who trusted in themselves and they were righteous. They looked down on everyone else. So we see that that's a problem, right? He talks about the you have to have faith to pray. And faith ultimately means that you trust in God more than you trust in yourself. Here's the prayer, or here's the parable, the story. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. This is continuing on in Luke 18, verse 10. One was a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. One was a righteous man, the other was not, is how they would have heard that. The Pharisee was standing and he was praying like this about himself. God, I thank you that I'm not like other people. I'm not greedy. I'm not unrighteous. I'm not an adulterer. I'm not even like this tax collector over here. I fast twice a week, God. I give 1/10 of everything I get. I mean, this guy was impressed with himself. He wanted other people to be impressed with him. He even wanted God to be impressed with him. And I just got news for you. God is not impressed with any of us. God is so holy and so righteous and so perfect. He is not impressed with you or I. We don't have anything to prove to God, right? He loves us anyways. We don't have to impress him, and he's not impressed by us anyways. But the tax collector gets something right. Here's what he does. But the tax collector, standing far off, he wouldn't even raise his eyes to heaven, but he kept striking his chest. And he said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. God, I know who I am. I know who you are. You're holy and righteous. I'm not. And then Jesus says, I tell you, this one went down to his house justified rather than the other. Why? Why was he justified? The unrighteous man, seemingly the tax collector, unjustified. The Pharisee, the righteous man, not justified. Why? What was the difference? Here's what Jesus says. Because everyone who exalts himself will be humble, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Part of prayer is having a deep humility that we need God, that we trust God more than we trust ourselves, that we are not God, God is. Matter of fact, in Ezra 8, 21 through 23, it says that the reason that they fasted and pleaded with God was in order to humble themselves. Part of prayer is this humility in going before God. God, I can't do what I'm asking you for. I'm not you. I'm not holy. I'm not all-powerful. I'm not omniscient. I'm not everywhere. God, I need you. God, I need you now. There's got to be an aspect of humility. God hates pride and arrogance. And so let's be a people who wear the ear of God out with a humble confidence that God is who he says he is, that we're not God, but he is, and he can do the things that we're asking him to do. If we prayed like that and prayed with shameless boldness like we talked about last week, some things would change in here and I believe externally in 2023 for us. I love you guys. We'll see you next week as we start talking about Scripture and the Bible and things surrounding it. We'll see you then.